A massive polar vortex collapse is happening right now, and it's about to completely change America's weather as we head into March. This is not just any ordinary weather event. We're witnessing the final split and collapse of the polar vortex, marking the seasonal end of this massive atmospheric circulation until next winter. What makes this absolutely unprecedented is that this is actually the second major stratospheric warming event this winter season, which typically only happens once every other year. Witnessing two in a single winter is literally a once-in-a-decade rarity, but here's where it gets really crazy. Instead of bringing the Arctic blast you might expect, this polar vortex split is actually acting as a shield against winter and could usher in record-breaking warmth across the eastern United States, just as severe weather season explodes back to life, with tornado threats already confirmed in Alabama. The polar vortex split is already underway, with forecast models showing that the final breakdown began around March 3rd and will be complete by March 5th. This stratospheric wind reversal started in the first days of March, with the zonal mean wind reversal around 60 degrees north and 10 millibars occurring between February 28th and March 1st. One of the split cores is moving over Canada into the United States, while the other is moving toward Siberia. This represents the complete seasonal breakdown of the polar circulation that has dominated our winter weather patterns. What we're seeing is called a sudden stratospheric warming event, where temperatures in the stratosphere, roughly 6 to 50 miles above Earth's surface, have jumped by more than 50 degrees Fahrenheit in just a few days. This dramatic temperature spike is disrupting the typical circulation of cold air and causing the polar vortex to stretch, weaken, and ultimately split into two distinct lobes. The high-pressure areas that have been compressing the polar vortex have completely disrupted its structure. The most remarkable thing about this event is how it's playing out completely opposite to what you'd normally expect. Usually when the polar vortex splits, it signals a southward spill of Arctic air that brings brutal cold across the United States. But this time, the current positioning is creating a massive high-pressure ridge over the lower 48 states. This ridge, which is an elongated area of high atmospheric pressure, typically brings stable, clear, and much warmer conditions. In what meteorologists are calling a paradoxical twist, this shattered polar vortex is currently acting as a shield against winter's return rather than a gateway for Arctic air. The National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center is showing high confidence in this pattern, with above-average temperatures forecast for the entire lower 48 during the second week of March. We're talking about a spring-like surge of mild temperatures that could bring record-breaking warmth to areas that just got hammered by the historic blizzard of 2026. But don't pack away those winter coats just yet, because there's a notorious lag time with these stratospheric events. It can take 4 to 6 weeks for changes in the upper atmosphere to fully sink down to the surface level. What this means is that while we're seeing this temporary warm shield effect now, the real impacts from the polar vortex collapse could still be coming later in March or even into April. Meanwhile, as this polar vortex drama plays out in the stratosphere, we're already seeing the early signs of severe weather season roaring back to life. The National Weather Service has confirmed an EF0 tornado that struck Trussville, Alabama on Thursday. The tornado path was 1.63 miles long, with maximum winds estimated at 85 miles per hour. This is just the beginning of what forecasters expect to be a very active severe weather season. The threat for severe weather, including tornadoes, is expected to crank up significantly across America's heartland as March progresses. The greatest risk for severe storms stretches from the Central Plains eastward into Alabama and Georgia. Historically, March is when Texas, Alabama, and Mississippi experience their highest tornado numbers of the year. Last year alone, a tornado outbreak spawned more than 90 twisters across 13 states and left dozens dead. AccuWeather's long-range forecasters are predicting 1,050 to 1,250 tornadoes across the United States this year, which compares to 1,544 preliminary tornado reports in 2025. While tornado counts may be around the historical average of 1,225, the atmosphere is still expected to favor repeated rounds of severe thunderstorms, especially storms capable of producing damaging winds and flooding downpours. The key factor driving this severe weather pattern is the expected quick exit of La Niña conditions, As La Niña fades, weather patterns become more conducive for thunderstorm development, raising the risks of large hail, winds over 60 miles per hour, and tornadoes. The most consistent corridor for severe weather episodes this spring is expected to set up from the eastern plains into the mid-Mississippi Valley and western Ohio Valley, especially during March and April. In March specifically, tornadoes are forecast to focus on an area from northern Georgia to Oklahoma and northward through most of Illinois. By April, tornadoes will become more frequent, with most tornado-producing storms focusing on the Mississippi River Valley. As we get into May, the focus shifts toward traditional Tornado Alley, with areas from central Texas to eastern Nebraska facing the highest tornado risk. The hail threat is also significant for 2026, with the highest risk expected from Texas to Alabama, plus another hotspot around Iowa, northern Missouri, eastern Nebraska, and northeastern Kansas. Hail can cause property damage losses that top $1 billion when storms hit densely populated areas. What makes the current weather pattern particularly volatile is this transition from winter to spring happening alongside the polar vortex collapse. We're seeing temperature extremes that are absolutely mind-boggling. While the Northeast continues digging out from the historic blizzard of 2026, temperatures in the Rio Grande Valley soared above 100 degrees Fahrenheit on Thursday, marking the first triple-digit readings in the United States for 2026. This dramatic temperature contrast is exactly the type of setup that fuels explosive severe weather development. When you have Arctic air masses clashing with tropical air masses, you create the perfect conditions for supercell thunderstorms that can produce large hail, damaging winds, and tornadoes. The jet stream pattern is becoming increasingly favorable for storm systems to track across the central United States. Multiple storm systems are forecast to move from the Rockies into the Great Plains, Ohio Valley, and even the East Coast throughout early March. This active storm track means we'll likely see several opportunities for severe weather outbreaks over the coming weeks. The polar vortex collapse is also creating ripple effects across the northern hemisphere. In Europe, the breakdown of the polar circulation is allowing cold air to spill southward, creating a completely different weather pattern there compared to what we're seeing in North America. This demonstrates just how interconnected global weather patterns really are. From a meteorological standpoint, what we're witnessing represents a textbook example of how the stratosphere and troposphere interact. The stratospheric warming event sends energy downward through the atmosphere, ultimately reshaping surface-level pressure fields. This leads to what meteorologists call a negative Arctic oscillation and North Atlantic oscillation pattern. During this coupling phase between the stratosphere and surface, high-latitude blocking tends to strengthen over Greenland and the Arctic Ocean, while the mid-latitude westerly flow weakens and becomes more meandering. Eventually, this can cause the jet stream to become more curved and potentially allow Arctic air to plunge southward, but the timing of that transition is still uncertain. The computer forecast models are showing this atmospheric breakdown continuing through March, with additional opportunities for severe storms developing as the weather pattern remains highly active. Some meteorologists are warning that we could see one of the most active starts to severe weather season in recent memory. For those living in tornado-prone areas, now is the time to review your severe weather safety plans. Make sure you know where the safest place to go is at home, work, and school. Review how you'll receive warnings, especially overnight when tornadoes can be particularly dangerous. Restock basic emergency supplies and make sure any shelters or safe spaces are accessible and not cluttered with storage. This polar vortex collapse represents a pivotal moment in the transition from winter to spring, and the impacts will likely be felt for weeks to come. While the immediate effect is bringing warmth to winter-weary areas, the long-term consequences could include a very active and potentially dangerous severe weather season as atmospheric patterns continue to reorganize. The unprecedented nature of having two major stratospheric warming events in one winter season has created a complex atmospheric situation that meteorologists are still trying to fully understand. What we do know is that March is shaping up to be a month of dramatic weather contrasts, temperature extremes, and increasing severe weather threats as this historic polar vortex collapse continues to reshape weather patterns across North America.